to the sea. Darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be.
Doesn't it seem like we have heard this voice already? From the moment Pastor Bob Joyce took over as pastor of his church in Benton, Arkansas, people were suspicious and had an interest in him. Something about his voice, the way he looked, and the way he acted seemed very familiar. A strange similarity, not just a normal one, started to be noticed by many people. His thick, jet black hair, sharp eyes, high cheekbones, and even his voice all reminded people of the legendary Elvis Presley, who was said to have died many years ago. Pastor Bob Joyce might not just be a pastor, right? In plain sight, could he really be Elvis Presley? Let's try to understand all this in detail. The physical resemblance between Pastor Bob Joyce and Elvis Presley is striking enough that many people find it hard to dismiss as a mere coincidence. When placed side by side with images of Elvis from his later years, Pastor Bob Joyce's face seems to carry the unmistakable features of the iconic singer. Let's understand these physical similarities deeply that have left fans and conspiracy theorists alike questioning whether Pastor Bob Joyce might actually be Elvis Presley in disguise. One thing that stands out about both guys is that their jawlines are almost exactly the same. Both Elvis and Pastor Bob have a strong, square jaw that frames their faces in a distinct way, giving them an air of authority and presence. Their jawlines, which taper smoothly into their broad chins, look remarkably similar, especially when viewed from certain angles. It's rare to find two people with such closely matched jaw structures, which is why this similarity often stands out as one of the most compelling. They also have eyes that look a lot alike. Elvis was known for his deep-set, intense eyes, which were often described as captivating and mysterious. Pastor Bob Joyce's eyes carry that same depth, and many of his congregation members and fans have commented on how reminiscent they are of Elvis's gaze. His eyes seem to have that same soulful, intense quality that Elvis's fans remember. Furthermore, they share the same broad nose, another feature that contributes to the striking resemblance. This broad, slightly rounded nose shape is relatively unique and gives both men a distinctive facial profile. Their hairline is one of the most interesting physical parallels. Elvis's signature hairstyle, often styled in a thick, wavy pompadour, was iconic during his career. Pastor Bob Joyce's hair bears an uncanny resemblance to Elvis's, not just in the way it's styled, but also in the way it falls and shapes his face. Pastor Bob's hairline has the same distinct wave, which is another reason why fans and onlookers immediately see Elvis in him. Their physical build also adds to the suspicion. Elvis was known for his broad shoulders and solid frame, a build that Pastor Bob Joyce shared. Both men stand at a similar height and have a similar body structure, with broad shoulders and a thick, sturdy build that's hard to ignore. This build is unusual, and it adds to how much the two men look alike, making it easy to understand why some people believe there might be more to the story. Fans have collected stories and proofs that say these physical similarities point to a deeper connection between the two guys, which makes the situation even more interesting. For some, these physical traits are more than just shared genetics or pure coincidence. They see them as signs that Elvis may have staged his death and adopted a new identity. In their view, these overlapping physical traits aren't just similarities, they're clues. The exactness of features like jaw lines, eye shape, nose structure, and even the distinctive hairline makes it difficult to completely dismiss the resemblance. It's still not clear if these parallels are signs of a real link or just random events, but the similarities between Pastor Bob Joyce and Elvis Presley are so interesting that a lot of people can't help but think that they might be the same person. But before diving deeper, we should first understand Elvis's entire life. Elvis Presley's life story is one of incredible talent, rise to fame, and lasting influence on music and culture. Born on January 8, 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi, Elvis grew up in a modest household. From a young age, he was exposed to gospel music in church, and this early love for music paved the way for his future. In 1954, Elvis's career began when he recorded a song at Sun Studio in Memphis, where his unique voice and charisma quickly attracted attention. By 1956, Elvis had become a national sensation with hits like Heartbreak Hotel and Hound Dog. His blend of rock, gospel, and rhythm and blues music gave birth to a new genre, and his captivating performances earned him the nickname the King of Rock and Roll. His success wasn't just about his voice. His bold dance moves and magnetic stage presence captivated audiences and made him an icon. However, his his fame also came with challenges. In 1958, he was drafted into the U.S. Army, pausing his career but increasing his public admiration. After returning from the military, Elvis starred in films like Jailhouse Rock and Ask Blue Hawaii, which only boosted his fame. Yet as the 1960s continued, he faced increasing competition from new artists, but Elvis proved his lasting appeal with a powerful 1968 comeback TV special, reminding fans of his extraordinary talent. Unfortunately, as his career grew, so did the pressures of fame. By the 1970s, Elvis struggled with health issues and became reliant on prescription drugs. On August 16, 1977, he was found dead at his Graceland home in Memphis, Tennessee. He was only 42 years old. To this day, Elvis is remembered not only as a music legend, but also as an icon who changed the face of popular music forever. When Pastor Bob Joyce sings gospel songs in his church, listeners are often struck by just how closely his voice resembles that of Elvis. This isn't just a matter of having a good singing voice. Many people believe that Pastor Bob Joyce's voice almost exactly matches Elvis Presley's famous baritone, which has led to some wild speculation and numerous comparisons. Elvis's voice was legendary for its rich tone, deep resonance, and soulful quality, especially when he sang gospel music. Although he was known as the king of rock and roll, gospel music was something he held close to his heart, and he often expressed that it was the music that spoke to him most deeply. In Elvis's gospel recordings, there's an emotional intensity in his voice, a powerful yet tender quality that seemed to express his deepest feelings. When Pastor Bob Joyce sings gospel, his voice displays an almost identical richness and emotional pull, one that captivates his congregation in a way that has led many to draw comparisons between the two. Elvis's voice has a tone that is deep and mellow. Elvis's tone was so full and resonant that it could fill a room, drawing listeners in and conveying both warmth and intensity. Pastor Bob Joyce's voice too has this rare quality, a warmth that's instantly captivating, causing some to feel as though they're listening to the legendary voice of Elvis himself. This tonal similarity is striking enough that those who have heard both men sing have remarked that the two voices could almost be the same person, adding fuel to the speculation. Elvis had a vocal range that allowed him to hit both lower and mid-range notes with ease, creating a dynamic sound that made his voice instantly recognizable. Pastor Bob Joyce also sings in a very similar pitch range, allowing him to effortlessly move between low resonant tones and higher, more powerful notes, especially during his gospel performances. This ability to mirror Elvis's range and versatility is another characteristic that makes Pastor Bob Joyce's voice so remarkable to listeners. Perhaps the most distinctive and convincing similarity, however, is in their vibrato, the subtle trembling effect that adds a layer of emotion to a singer's voice. Elvis had a unique vibrato, one that gently wavered and lent a soulful quality to his songs, making them feel deeper and more moving. In a similar way, Pastor Bob Joyce's vibrato has this gentle, wave-like quality, creating an emotional resonance that listeners say feels incredibly Elvis-like. It's a specific vocal trait that not everyone possesses and is difficult to replicate convincingly, adding yet another layer of mystery to the resemblance. For fans of Elvis and followers of this theory, these vocal similarities are strong proof that there might be a deeper connection between Pastor Bob Joyce and Elvis Presley. While no definitive evidence exists to prove they are the same person, the voice, a deeply personal and distinct characteristic, raises questions that are hard for many to dismiss. For fans, the idea that two individuals could share such uniquely specific vocal traits like tone, pitch, and vibrato, is almost too coincidental. People who have been to Pastor Bob's church or followed Elvis's life have noticed that he often talks about Elvis's personal life and music career in a way that seems almost like he's lived those memories himself. But what's really interesting isn't just how much he seems to know, it's the personal details and events he talks about, which are probably only known to people who were close to Elvis. This is more in-depth information than any die-hard fan or author could have. Joyce is said to have talked about problems, experiences, and even specific events that sound a lot like Elvis's life. People who have heard these stories say they are complicated and sound like they were told by someone who was there. As an example, Joyce sometimes talks about trials and lessons in a way that makes me think of the problems Elvis faced in his life, such as the constant pressure of fame and the difficulty of handling his public and private life. Some of Joyce's lectures deal with issues that Elvis himself had to deal with. He talks a lot about being humble, being forgiven, and finding peace beyond material success. These are all things that Elvis publicly fought with, especially in his later years. With these thematic overlaps in his personal memories, some churchgoers and outsiders think Joyce is not speaking as an outsider, but as someone who knows Elvis well, almost like he's talking about Elvis's problems and lessons while pretending to be a preacher. Another thing that makes people suspicious is that Joyce seems to know a lot about Elvis's music career. He sometimes talks about specific shows or song histories that fit with Elvis's discography, giving information that even die-hard fans wouldn't know. This level of knowledge isn't just about learning the songs or performances, it's also about understanding Elvis's personal thoughts and how those thoughts and feelings affected his life at the time. Joyce might talk about how certain lyrics are linked to times of deep thought or problems that Elvis had, which were very private times in his life. Some fans think these links are more than just a coincidence and point to a deeper relationship between Joyce and Elvis. Graceland is the famous home of Elvis Presley. Some people say they heard references to it as more than just a place, as if it had personal value for Joyce. When he talks about Graceland, he makes small comments or slips that make people wonder if his connection to the famous house is more than academic or historic. This makes people think that he may have a personal connection to the place. All of these pieces of evidence suggest that Pastor Bob Joyce may not just know about Elvis's life out of admiration or fandom, but because he has a deeper and more personal connection with the man. There are different opinions on whether these proofs really show a link to Elvis or are just random events. However, they have made many people wonder if Pastor Bob Joyce is hiding a part of himself that the world thought it had lost a long time ago. Elvis allegedly died of a heart attack at his Graceland home on August 16, 1977. He was only 42 years old at the time. This news shocked people all over the world and broke the hearts of millions of fans. But almost right away, after the news came out, there were rumors that Elvis might not have really died. Some fans and conspiracy theorists didn't believe what they heard about his death and thought that the king of rock and roll might have faked his own death to avoid the stress of being famous. This speculation is based on a number of reasons. For one thing, many people who knew Elvis well saw that he was tired and unhappy with his life long before he was thought to have died. Elvis had been clear that he wanted a break from his demanding job for a long time, after years of long touring schedules, personal problems, and too much attention from the public. He was emotionally and physically tired, and his friends said he often talked about stepping away from the stage. Some of his friends think that his words showed that he wanted a new start, maybe even one so big that he would disappear from public view for good. The idea is that Elvis faked his death so that he could live a simpler life without the pressures and standards of being famous. After all, he had been through a lot of fame and attention that not many people could really understand. As a famous person around the world, he rarely had time or space for himself. Some people think that Elvis could have avoided all the attention by pretending to be dead and started over, maybe as a normal person living a quiet, peaceful life. One of the main points used to back this theory is that Elvis is said to have dropped a lot of hints in the months before he died. In interviews, he talked about wanting to quit, saying he wasn't happy with his current life, and even said vague things about getting away and finding peace. People who paid close attention to Elvis's life saw these comments as subtle hints that he might have been planning something bigger. Some strange facts about his death have also been reported, which conspiracy theorists find suspicious. Some say that some papers about his death didn't make sense or had strange parts that made them look like something might have been hidden. Many Elvis fans believe that the fact that his autopsy and funeral plans were kept secret, along with other factors, supports the idea that Elvis may have faked his own death. People have seen Elvis in different parts of the United States over the years, which has led some to think that he's been living quietly under a new name. These ideas have been brought up again since Pastor Bob Joyce has been seen as someone who looks a lot like Elvis. Some fans say that both guys have similar faces and voices, and they both love gospel music. Even though these aren't solid proof, they do add to the idea that preacher Bob Joyce is really Elvis and is now living a quiet life as a preacher. Millions of Elvis Presley fans around the world were shocked when he died in 1977. Many people wondered if Elvis had really died or if he had faked his death to live a quieter, more private life. But Elvis sightings became almost as famous as the man himself. Over the years, more and more sightings were recorded. Often loyal fans said they thought they had seen the king in disguise, hanging out with regular people in strange places. People said they saw Elvis buying gas in the country, eating in small-town restaurants, and shopping in plane shops. All of these sightings were never fully proven, but the stories kept the idea alive. Maybe, just maybe, Elvis had found a way to hide from his fame. Some people thought that these sightings were just the wild imaginations of sad fans, but the large number of reports and the variety of places where they happened made it hard to ignore totally. For many years, these reports were just urban legends. Interesting, but not true. When Pastor Bob Joyce came along, though, everything changed. When Pastor Joyce went out in public, it was impossible to miss witness how much he looked like Elvis Presley. Fans who used to ignore the reports started to look at them with new interest. A lot of people wondered what Elvis was up to because Bob Joyce looked a lot like Elvis. People who saw Elvis in the past could have been right if they thought he had changed his identity and become a preacher. Because he wanted to avoid being seen by too many people, Elvis only showed up in small, low-key places where he could sneak away without drawing too much attention to himself. Their looks aren't the only things that are similar. Pastor Bob Joyce walks and sounds a lot like Sheryl Sandberg. Fans who have been to his church services or listened to tapes online say that the tone, pitch, and style of his singing are very much like Elvis's. Some people even use the times of certain sightings as clues. A lot of the reports happened in places that Joyce might have been traveling or that were close to his home. Supporters of the idea say that the early sightings could have been random, but they could also mean that Elvis had been hiding in plain sight the whole time, waiting for the right time to come back, but in a very different role. There isn't strong proof that Pastor Bob Joyce is Elvis, but the fact that he looks a lot like Elvis and that he has been seen before supports the idea. Many people think that the repeated reports over the years were all parts of a bigger puzzle that pointed to a secret truth that no one had found yet. It's even more interesting to think that Elvis might have chosen a life away from fame to find peace in a spiritual role. Though some people don't believe it, those who do think that the reports of Elvis are part of a bigger story that could still be happening right now. Why would a man who was once one of the most famous faces in the world choose to live as a pastor in Arkansas? For those who believe Pastor Bob Joyce is Elvis Presley, the answer is simple. The pastoral role offers a level of anonymity and peace that Elvis never experienced. The humble life of a pastor far from the spotlight allows him to reconnect with his spiritual side, which was always important to him. After years in the music business, stepping into a role of service and humility might have offered Elvis a new lease on life. As the story of Pastor Bob Joyce and Elvis Presley revealed, it leaves us with two important questions. Could this truly be the final chapter of Elvis's story? Or is this resemblance simply an unusual coincidence that conspiracy theories have spun out of control? Do tell us in the comment section. Some believe it's all a grand scam, while others see it as the ultimate comeback story, hiding in plain sight. Whether Pastor Bob Joyce is Elvis or not, the mystery endures, captivating audiences and leaving the world wondering if the king truly left the building or if he's been here all along.